One of Airbus' most popular aircraft is the A-22. Popular and efficient aircraft lineups. But did you know they were never meant for Airbus in the first place? Yep, they were developed by Canadian aircraft manufacturer Bombardier Aerospace and were close to being canceled due to limited initial success. This was an opportunity for Airbus and indeed Boeing to swoop in. However, due to some personal disagreements between Bombardier and Boeing chose to ignore the opportunity and basically handed Airbus a free stake, an aircraft line, and now they're regretting the decision. So what happened? Stay through the video's conclusion. To find out, there is no such thing as an Airbus A220 developed from scratch. This may sound absurd, but Airbus True, what we know today, is the A220 was actually developed as the CS series by Bombardier, which had its main flight in September 2013. Under the Bombardier series, named the Bombardier C series, was developed by, you guessed it, Bombardier to be the latest new entry narrow-body aircraft in the 1,260-seat category. They initially came in two variants, the CS-100 and the CS-300, with a third called the CS-500, allegedly still in development stages on paper. This was supposed to be a game share. Its range of it took between 3,450 and 3,600 nautical miles. Competitive for medium-haul travel, its capacity to hold a potential 160 passengers also elevated it from the status of regional jet. The fuel burn rate was much better than its rivals, and their Pratt & Whitney PW150G engine granted it an efficiency that's kept up with modern-day requirements, but it did not sell well. Well, this was because carriers across the world questioned Bombardier's ability to support the jet outside the shores of Canada. You see, Bombardier used to be and still are known for developing business in regional jets. So pivoting into medium-haul travel was always going to pose some form of risk, especially to lessors. Fortunately, a number of carriers still took the risk, however, and enjoyed all the advantages of flying so effectively aircraft. But this wasn't enough for Bomber, because they were still making losses due to production delays and competition from bigger players in Airbus and Boeing. So they needed to find a solution to the large hole the operation was burning into their pockets. They were forced to give up control of the C-Series program. The only two viable options were Airbus and Boeing seemed to make the most logical sense due to Bombard, and Boeing being practically neighbors. Shockingly, Boeing almost single-handedly denied themselves the opportunity, leaving Airbus to swoop in and purchase a 50.01% stake in the program for almost nothing in July 2018. But before we get into how Boeing missed the boat with the Bombardier C series, there is one key thing you need to understand on how, in the end, Airbus got their hands on the C series. You see, the Canadian government was greatly subsidizing the development and production of the C series right from the start. The initial estimated $2.1 billion development costs were shared equally between the Canadian, but these are the government and the suppliers' costs rose up to $3.5 billion during development in 2009, leading to the program with delays during the initial stages. However, the Canadian bidder was once more visited by the government. Rescued during the final stages with a bunch of interest-free loans, multiple aid packages worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and an additional investment than 1 billion Canadian dollars as they attempted to rescue the business from their struggling program. This government support allowed Bombardier to be able to sell their aircrafts for less than their actual production costs in order to expand into different markets. This act is known as price dumping, and it's actually more common than most people think, especially for aircraft manufacturers trying to gain a foothold in new markets where they normally wouldn't be competitive. But on the 28th of April 2016, Bombardier did something that might have taken price dumping too far, and Boeing, as you can see, was unimpressed. In order to gain a strong foothold in the Bombardier of the American airspace, made a bold and somewhat foolish choice. They took a C-Series order from Delta Airlines for 75 Cs, 100 US plus 50 options, that was estimated close to $33.2 million each, and instead chose to sell them to Delta for only $19.6 million each. And this didn't sit well with Boeing. You see, Delta was one of Boeing's biggest patrons, and the newer CS-100S were going to be directly competing with Boeing 737s. Boeing didn't like this, so they petitioned the United States International Trade Commission against Batter's price dumping. In response to this, Bombardier was assigned the responsibility of close to 300% in the American market as U.S. Department of Commerce aimed to affirm its America First policy. This greatly affected the chances of expansion of the bomber into the largest aviation market on the planet. And it didn't get any better for Bombardier, because this directly affects Bombardier was forced to sell a majority stake in the C-Series. And here is where Airbus came into the picture. The European manufacturer saw a massive opportunity as they had already had an established presence in the U.S. market. While how this sounds, it's not compared to what then happened, because the craziest part about this deal between Bombardier and Airbus was that Airbus didn't need to pay any money or incur any debt for its share in the C-Series program. So Boeing, in trying to get rid of one competitor, ended up strengthening their biggest competitors in what turned out to be a fake fatal mistake for the U.S. manufacturer. So as part of the agreement, Airbus was going to produce the Bombardier CS series jets in the United States with their supply chain. The importance of expertise to the deal, the C series would be rebranded to the A220 series, which most of you are aware of since then have grown exponentially in popularity. In essence, Boeing gave their biggest competitor, Airbus, a plane for free. But can we really blame them? Well, to understand why Boeing basically ignored the C-Series, we have to look at the 737, and in particular the MAX 7 series. You see, in terms of single-A aircraft, Boeing had stopped production of the 717 back in 2006, 2 years before the introduction of the C-Series jets. In this produced the 737, 7007, and eventually the MAX 7. The smallest Boeing commercial jet still in production. However, Boeing faced with the MAX 7 a significant issue. There was no demand. For example, Southwest, owning the world's largest fleet of 737, 707s, ordered just 30 MAX 7. In fact, the market interest in the MAX 7 was so low that in 2014, many questioned if it would ever be built. So it was not a great start for the MAX 7. And Boeing knew they needed to change something. They revealed a redesigned MAX 7 at the 2016 Farnborough Air Show, making it essentially a simpler reduction of the maximum 8. Rather a unique design. This turned out to be another bad decision from Boeing, because the MAX 7 didn't bring anything new to the table, but instead was niche-driven for Boeing's biggest C customers, as later admitted by the U.S. manufacturer itself. Meanwhile, the C-Series passed by the MAX with a clean sheet design in a sector Boeing had abandoned a long time ago. In an article of Liam News, Boeing even stated the 100 to 150 seat sector as a Bermuda Triangle where planes simply disappeared. However, one thing that Boeing has failed to accept, two things. One, that they still roll with an outdated strategy of the 737-2. They didn't invest in a new single-aisle plane. Instead, what Boeing seemed to have done, used complaints from the trade to stop competitors with better airplane designs to get a grip on the aviation market. Boeing probably thought that by doing this, they would buy themselves enough time to figure out the 100 to 150 seat sector or to maintain their grip in the single market. But theirs was petition against Batter's price dumping that made them lose more than just the CS series to begin with. The 300% duty, which Boeing worked so hard to impose on Bombardier's jets to block competition, only lasted about 7 months until on January 26, 2018. This occurred in the wake of the Canadian government filing a complaint against the U.S. at the World Trade Organization. As a result of this, the imposed duties were overturned, and however, no duty orders were issued at this point. Airbus already had the majority controlling stake in the C-Series, so any chance for Boeing to control the C-Series had been missed. Then the Bombardier C-Series also had a Canadians are proud of their nation. The government, it was meant to revolutionize the Canadian airspace, and that's why a lot of money was pumped into the development, even when the project was having trouble at first. So Boeing is attempting to prevent them from expanding into the U.S. market, really infuriated the Canadian government, and as a result, Boeing lost a contract to provide the Canadian Air Force with a new fighter jet. You see, Boeing's F-18 Super Hornet was the aircraft initially favored to lead the Canadian Air Force fleet. But after what happened with the C-Series, the more expensive Lockheed Martin F-35A was chosen instead in trying to block U.S. competition. Boeing only resulted in hostility between themselves and the Canadian government and ended up losing more money. Their loss was Airbus's gain here. But are they really missing out on that much? Well, it's hard to say how much Boeing will be not being able to take advantage of Bob Deere's situation, because there have been pros and cons for Airbus so far. The pros include producing less noise, being more fuel efficient than competing aircraft such as the 737 MAX and A320neo, and being able to land in remote airports. But the downside for Airbus is that they've struggled to make the operation profitable. So far, this is because the production processes have been spread across continents, with Airbus based in Europe and Bombardier based in Canada. An arrangement like this would have made so much sense for Boeing because they could have maintained the entirety of the production process continent, which is a significant benefit. The A220's production efficiency also clashed with the sales of some of Airbus's original jets, such as the A319, and with discussions about BOM potentially developing a new jet called the CS500 or A22500 with a stretched fuselage and slickly extended range. It would only serve as an almost direct competition for other Airbus aircrafts, such as the A320neo. But while this could affect the successes of the A320neo, it does leave Airbus well secured in the single medium-sized aisle market. And this is yet another opportunity Boeing could have taken advantage of. Nevertheless, Airbus have made plans to raise the stakes they hold in the SEAL series, which shows their bell and the long-term viability of the project. So no matter how you put it, not getting that first-time free 50.01% stake was a significant error for Boeing. Just hopefully one they wouldn't regret missing too much. But what do you think? Did Boeing fumble by treating Bombardier as cutthroat competition, or did they do what any airline should have done to protect their competitiveness? Please let us know your thoughts in the remarks below.